Good morning. I wanted to talk about some people that we all deal with. Have you ever met somebody where you meet them and you just feel like there's no way that you're going to be able to get along, to connect well, anything like that? Maybe you've been to another country. You went to another country and when you went there, you met the people, and the people were different. Their culture was not the same as yours. Some of the things that you decided that you would do because they're okay in your culture aren't okay in theirs. Maybe it's not something as extreme as going to another country. Maybe you decided to go with a friend. You went with your friend, and when you went with them, they went to their friend. And so when you go to meet their friend is very different. You think to yourself, there's no way I'll be able to get along with this friend. You see, they're messy. They don't shower. They're weird. They smell bad. You went into their restroom and you notice that they don't even have hand soap at the sink. Your friend gets along with them really well. But you think to yourself, there's no way I could ever connect with someone like that. Have you ever been in that situation where you meet someone and you just know that there's no way you could ever connect? I want to tell a story real quick about a personal event in my life. I want to tell the story of when I went to prison. For the record, I did not go to prison against my will. I was not forced to go there. I went there voluntarily, and I went there for ministry. You see, the ministry that I was involved in this one particular summer in 2019, they did prison ministry. They would go into prisons, and they still do, and they talk to the prisoners and witness and minister to the prisoners who are there. I was excited to go. I had never really been around prisoners much. You see, I grew up in a very conservative household. I grew up in the kind of household that tells you that when somebody goes to jail, it's because they've done something very wrong. When someone goes to jail, that's somebody that we should not really associate with. Don't get caught up in that. They've killed somebody, they've stolen, they've done drugs, they've done something that deserves prison. I've never killed someone, I've never stolen. There was that one time where I took a rock from my cousin, but that was about the extent of my career as a thief. So prison was not exactly somewhere where I just wanted to go and be around. But I thought, what the heck, why not? I'll try it. And deep down, I kind of knew that there was no way I was ever going to be able to really connect with them. You see, they had their world and I had mine. So I go and I show up to do this ministry. And when I get there, I quickly find out that this is not merely a simple ministry. This is not simply just me showing up and telling them the gospel. No, I get there, and it's a rap concert. You see, the person who had been mentoring me and discipling me, that was the leader of this ministry that I was with, you see, he is a Christian rapper from Houston. So I didn't know at the time that when I'm showing up for a rap concert to show them the gospel through rap. Now, I don't know if you know much about rappers. I don't know if you've ever really seen rappers, but let's just say I'm not the typical person that you would associate with rap. Despite my looks, I am not the world's greatest rhymer. I don't rhyme very well. I don't have very good rhythm. I'm not exactly a supreme, ultimate candidate for a rap concert. But I get there nonetheless, and people are expecting this rap concert, and they're asking me if I'm a rapper, to which I just reply, no, I'm not. And so on top of me not having anything in common with a lot of these people, I'm now not even part of the reason that they're there in the first place. But my mentor, he tells me, don't worry about it. Just sit by them, be with them, pray for them, and pray with them. And so I'm thinking to myself, okay, I will pray for them. I will pray with them. And as I'm sitting around these people who I'm praying for, something interesting starts to happen. As this concert goes on, as these people are listening to this music, they start to respond to the message that's being given through the music. They start to understand the concept of salvation, not by somebody going in with a Bible and preaching to them, but by somebody giving the gospel through rap. And so I'm still around these people who some have killed, some have wounded people, some have stolen, some have gone there on drug offenses. All of these people where I don't have a whole lot in common with, but now I start to see that we have common ground through Jesus. After the concert, I'm talking to some of the prisoners, and as we have our conversation, something interesting happens. They start to pray for me, and they just want to encourage me in my ministry. Some of the same people who had teardrops tattooed on their face, which, if you're familiar with a teardrop tattoo, oftentimes means that they've killed somebody. These same people are praying for me. These same people have the same gospel and the same salvation that I have. So just when I thought that we had nothing in common, to my surprise, we do. I want us to look at a story in the book of Acts of somebody who meets somebody who they just don't have a whole lot in common with. They're the people who, just like a lot of prisoners, are considered a menace to society. People who nobody wants to really affiliate with. If you have your Bibles, open up with me to the book of Acts. We'll be in chapter 10, starting in verse 1. If you'll remember from last week's sermon going through Acts chapter 9, you should understand a little bit about where Peter is. The Apostle Peter, he's in a city called Joppa. He has just healed a woman by the name of Dorcas, or Tabitha, whichever you'd prefer to call her. I prefer Dorcas because I think it sounds funny. But he is currently with them in Joppa. Now, in TV shows or in movies, this is often kind of the part where the narrator says, meanwhile. You see, meanwhile, as Peter is in Joppa, here's what's happening, starting in verse 1 of Acts chapter 10. It says, there was a man in Caesarea named Cornelius, a centurion of what was called the Italian regiment. He was a devout man and feared God along with his whole household. He did many charitable deeds for the Jewish people and always prayed to God. About 3 p.m, he distinctly saw in a vision an angel of God who came in and said to him, Cornelius. Staring at him in awe, he said, "What is it, Lord?" The angel told him, "Your prayers and your acts of charity have ascended as a memorial offering before God. Now send men to Joppa and call for Simon, who is also named Peter. He is lodging with Simon, a tanner, whose house is by the sea." When the angel spoke to him and had gone, he called 2 of his household servants and a devout soldier, who was one of those who attended him. After explaining everything to them, he sent them to Joppa. We have a couple of interesting facts that take place in these first few verses. For one, a man named Cornelius, who is a Roman centurion. The reason that that's important is because the Romans were Gentiles. A Gentile was anybody who was not Jewish. It was somebody who was a foreigner. But the Romans were the worst of the Gentiles in the Jews' mind. You see, these Jews at this time period, they were oppressed relentlessly by the Romans. So on top of them not affiliating themselves with Gentiles, to affiliate yourself with a Roman would have been far worse. Jews who associated with Romans were not well liked. Think of tax collectors. Think of the people who worked as Roman officials. They were not well liked by the Jewish population. But you see, that's important to what happens later on in the story. And it also leads us to the next point, where he was a God-fearing man, along with his household. And he did many charitable deeds for the Jewish people. And he prayed regularly. This was not just an average Roman. This was a man who was trying to explore the Jewish faith. He was not a Jewish convert because that would have required circumcision. He is simply just a man who honors the Jewish God. And because of this, an angel appears to him in a vision. Now, this is something that's very rare. It is very rare when God sends a messenger to appear to Gentiles, let alone to Romans. There are many Jews who haven't even had a vision from the Lord, let alone this unclean, defiled Gentile. The vision tells him to seek out Simon Peter, a Jewish man who most likely will have nothing to do with Cornelius. But the story goes on. Reading on in Acts chapter 10, starting at verse 9, now we see that it says, the next day, as they were traveling and nearing the city, Peter went up to pray on the roof about noon. He became hungry and wanted to eat, but while they were preparing something, he fell into a trance. He saw heaven opened and an object that resembled a large sheet coming down, being lowered by its four corners to the earth. In it were all the four-footed animals and reptiles of the earth, and the birds of the sky. And a voice said to him, "Get up, Peter, kill and eat." "No, Lord," Peter said, "for I have never eaten anything impure and ritually unclean." Again, a second time, the voice said to him, "What God has made clean, do not call impure." This happened 3 times, and suddenly the object was taken up into heaven. So Peter is praying, and as he's praying, he gets hungry. And naturally, I guess when you get hungry and you fall asleep into a trance, you start to dream about food. Now, here's the wicked trick that happens. This food is all food that he cannot eat. All of these different foods that he cannot eat because he's Jewish and because of the sacraments and the requirements religiously of the Jewish people, he can't eat, but he's hungry. However, when he tries to tell the Lord how good he is of a Jew, how he's never eaten anything unclean, and he won't, the Lord tells him, "What God has made clean, do not call impure." Now, spoiler alert, the interesting thing about this is that this is not merely just about food. This is not just the Lord telling Peter what he can and cannot eat. This clean versus unclean is not simply about what is okay to eat. What we will see revealed is that God has a much deeper meaning to what is clean versus unclean. So as we read on, we see that this has happened 3 times. It's not merely an accident. It happens 3 times so that it is set in stone that God has made this clean. This food is clean. More importantly, God has made people clean. To summarize kind of what happens next, you see that as this goes on, as he has this vision, what happens in the vision is that the Lord tells him that men are coming to take him to meet Cornelius. So after the vision ends, he goes downstairs and he finds the men who are Gentile men coming to bring Peter to Cornelius. And without hesitation, without any objection, Peter decides to go with them, which is not very normal. Jews do not associate themselves with Gentiles. So for a Jewish man to walk away with Gentile people, that's not okay. But Peter has this concept that what God has made clean, people cannot make unclean. And so Peter goes with them to the house of Cornelius. And when Peter meets Cornelius, Cornelius falls at Peter's feet and worships him. Peter pulls him up and tells him that he is simply a man and that the Lord has appeared in a vision. And that even though they do not normally associate with unclean Gentiles, Peter has come without objection because of what the Lord has shown him and told him. Cornelius brings up the vision that he had. He brings it up as if to say that this is no mere coincidence that God has given you a vision, because he's also given me a vision. In my vision, I was told to send men to go and get you. And so it is good that you have come. It is good that you are here. We can worship together, and what God has told you, you can now tell me. What God has commanded you to preach can now be preached to me and can be preached to my family. It is good that you have come. Have you ever been around people that you just feel like you have nothing in common with? Maybe you've been around some weird people. Maybe you've been around some normal people. And you just think that there's no way I can really connect with this person. Peter found himself in a similar position. But through a vision, Peter was told that what God has made pure, man cannot make impure. So, the moral of the story is that the gospel is for everyone. Whether it's weird people or normal people, sad people or happy people, crime people or justice people, regardless of it being dirty people or clean people, deserving people and undeserving people, all people are made clean because of the Lord. What God has made pure cannot be made impure by humans. And that's because the sacrifice of Jesus on the cross is for everybody. And that is the message that is taught to us today. That regardless of who you're with, the gospel is for them. Because the gospel is for everyone.